The last time I made a video about the day before was shortly after the game's initial reveal. This is the upcoming open world zombie survival MMO that's been getting a ton of early attention. Their first gameplay trailer has already racked up over 1.7 million views, and people seem genuinely excited. Like, it's got a solid like to dislike ratio and mostly positive comments, with the occasional meme, which I can respect. The game's been getting loads of attention and coverage here on YouTube as well. Reaction videos in particular have been doing really well, and again, have been generally positive. And just like a lot of other people, my first impression was that this thing looked pretty darn good. That initial trailer showcased this dark, gritty city that's drawn lots of comparisons to Division or Last of Us, and we got to see some player interaction, looting of the environment, sneaking around, running from zombies, a little bit of combat, and open world PvP. This was clearly a very scripted but nevertheless interesting looking trailer. So all this excitement around the day before, like, I totally get it. We've got this brand new, decent looking zombie survival MMO with open world PvP. There's a big audience for a game like that, myself included. However, beyond it being an early, heavily scripted trailer and us knowing how true to reality those have turned out many times in the past, my biggest concern initially was actually the studio making this game, Fantastic, does not have a good track record. So far, they've launched and abandoned 2 early access games in the past 4 years, neither of which were anywhere near the scope or scale of what they're talking about making with the day before. Their first title, The Wild 8, was a top-down survival action adventure game that launched into Steam Early Access in 2017 and initially actually did have decent reviews. However, that has changed quite a bit over time, as apparently still 4 years later, the game has never been finished. In fact, back in 2017, just a few months after the early access launch, Fantastic sold the game to their publisher, Hype Train Digital, due to what they said was internal conflict, and they then moved on to work on their next project, which was Dead Dozen. This was a multiplayer action horror game that they released on March 7th, 2018. That game was so uninteresting, it didn't receive a single review from any major outlet that I could find. It does have roughly 400 reviews on Steam that are mixed, with the most recent ones being predominantly negative. So after they launched this game into early access in March 2018, development was halted just 4 months later in June. And in fact, the website for deaddozen.com doesn't even exist anymore, even though the game is still apparently available for sale for $4, and instead it redirects you to the day before's website. So they released a game into early access, then almost immediately cashed out before getting anywhere close to finishing it to work on their next project. They then released that project just 1 year later, and after just 4 months, they stop development and move on to their newest project, which is apparently this game the day before. So like I said, they don't have a great track record. But, and I want to be clear about this, that does not mean that the day before can't be a good game, or that we shouldn't be interested in learning more about what it's going to offer. It does mean, though, that we should keep in mind these things when it comes to our expectations on what they might deliver and how likely or not they are to actually finish it, because you can bet your ass that just like those last 2 games, this thing will also be launching into early access, and we'll just have to keep our fingers crossed that they don't abandon it as well. Now, with all of that out of the way, I do like what I've seen so far of this game, but we just kind of have to set the groundwork. And for the rest of this video, I want to focus on what they've shown us of the day before and what kind of information we can pull from it. All right, so let's talk about the first trailer. This thing came out, like I said, a few months ago, and I totally agree, it looked really good. Now, the official details about this game, according to the website and Steam page, they say that the day before is going to be an open world survival MMO that's set in a deadly post-pandemic America, overrun by flesh-hungry infected and survivors fighting each other for food, weapons, and cars. They say we'll get to explore a huge detailed world with large cities and towns, snow-capped mountains, rivers, and forests while traveling either on foot or in vehicles. We can search through abandoned cars, homes, skyscrapers as we are scavenging around for resources. There's going to be these survivor colonies where we can go to sell loot, to trade, and communicate with other players. And we'll have to fight off infected as well as other players using realistic basic weapons. And yes, they have said this is going to be a PvP focused game, but there will still be plenty of interesting activities for PvE fans as we fight back those AI controlled zombies. The Day Before is being developed on the latest version of Unreal Engine, we know that. And also, finally, they're saying that this is supposed to be bringing some big innovation to the long stagnant survival MMO genre, which I totally agree. It's a pretty stagnant and I think a genre with a lot of unrealized potential, which is where I think a lot of this excitement is coming from, because there's tons of people who want like a good updated modern day zombie survival game, MMO, whatever. And yeah, I'm in that camp. I would love for this to be amazing. Now, when it comes to the first trailer, we got some details about the game beyond the things that they've talked about. So first off, it opens up with the players driving a vehicle, where we learn that there is a mechanic where you can run out of fuel. We see players interacting with abandoned cars, soda machines, even downed enemies. We got a look at the inventory with a player model, the gear spot, a backpack, and loot screen. We see the entering of different shops and other buildings, although it does look that only a few selected areas you can actually go into, not every building in the city, which makes sense because no game lets you go in every building in the city, at least not ones that look this good. We got to see a bunch of gunplay, first with the players fighting off other players, and I do like the simplistic UI with a rather basic reticle with some spread when firing. We also see some fighting of zombies, which they went down pretty quickly in this trailer. That actually changes in the upcoming footage. One thing I love to see as well was the weather effects with the snowstorm rolling in after they exited the shop, and the snowstorm was also tied directly to the temperature gauge for the player survival. We got to take a look at crafting, where you can make consumables and equipment with some basic resources. And the watermark at the bottom of this trailer indicates that yes, all of this is actually in-game footage. So yeah, like I mentioned, even though this was all clearly scripted, the fact that they're saying this is in-game footage sounds really promising, because this all looked pretty darn good. I really enjoyed what I saw. And I assumed at the time that this was pretty much very, very likely just a vertical slice of the game, that they didn't have the full game built out. And I think even with the positive reception, there was still a bit of skepticism just based off the trailer. All of that background information that I just mentioned aside, just looking at the trailer, there was a bit of skepticism. And the developer has responded to that by basically releasing a ton of new footage. Since that first trailer, we've got a few short environmental clips. We saw a campfire, air dancer, a player flickering these lights off in a hallway. We got some longer look at PvP engagements with this 2-minute combat trailer. And then just recently, they released a 13-minute gameplay trailer, which showed some off-road driving, some more searching and looting of this abandoned gas station, some fighting of zombies, hiding from a group of enemy players. And all of this stuff, all of these trailers that they've released since that first one, does in fact have me believing that yes, this might actually be a real game. Obviously they had something built there, but we're getting more and more as we get a closer look. It becomes more and more clear that they are building something here, and it could be something special. Fingers crossed, their past work ignored. This could be something special. So let's actually dive in a little bit to what they've released and see what more information we can get from this. So like I mentioned, the clips that they released were pretty basic. There was a handful of like roughly 30-second clips that just showed off some basic environments and some scene setting. I think these are really just meant to kind of tease. These are great things to post on Twitter or whatever kind of garbage you want to do. But the PvP trailer and the recent trailer are the good ones. So starting with the 2-minute PvP trailer, this one actually opens with the player looking to roll up a sleeping bag. And I assume that this actually means the game is going to have some sort of a resting mechanic. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't go through the work of building out this animation. So that's pretty cool. They're in the first floor of some sort of a home. It's a group of 3 players, and there appears to have been some sort of recent conflict here. In one corner, we see a player fiddling around with their backpack. I'm going to assume that this is the animation for when players are looking through their inventory. A lot of games do something like this. But also interesting, briefly, you see on the other side that a player looks to be tending to a plant. And just like with the sleeping bag and the backpack animation, I assume they've built this animation for a reason, and there might actually be some sort of tending to crops mechanic, like you can grow herbs or something to make for bandages or whatever, you know what I mean? Then the main character in this footage steps outside. We see them interact with a door, step out into the street. We get this very, very Division looking city street just by virtue of it being like focused on realism and being a city. A lot of cities look alike, but yeah, it looks a lot like the Division. And then once they start interacting, we do hear gunshots off of the distance, and the player and his group of allies then readies for an upcoming fight. And there's a kind of a like roughly 1 minute combat section. It's all pretty straightforward. Like, this is a third-person looter shooter. As I noticed and talked about in that first trailer, I do love the simplistic UI that we're seeing when it comes to being in combat. I hope it actually stays this way, like, because there's almost nothing cluttering up the user interface. I really actually do enjoy that we're not seeing health bars and a bunch of notifiers and indicators and markers, and there's not a quest log in the corner. I don't know if it's going to stay this way or if it's just for these trailers, but I like the simplistic take, and I do kind of hope that that's what this game ends up settling on. So we see some players exchanging fire. They're crouching behind the cover of cars. One big thing that I want to point out at the end of this, though, it appears in that gunfire exchange that the main character downs another one of his enemies, and then that main player jogs over and performs an execute. Now, this would imply that there's a down but not out state, which would also mean that there's an option to revive them, and of course that on the flip side, you can actually go up and execute to finish off those players. It'd be pretty cool if that mechanic was in this. You don't see, have there been a lot of zombie games with down but not out states? My brain's not working right now. And finally, the trailer wraps up with what looks to be another player barging in with a tank, and they continue their tradition of these cringy fake gamer comms. Hey, motherfucker! I don't know why they can't stop doing these things, but hey, sure, I guess that's how gamer bros talk, right? 420 YOLO. All right, let's move on to the most recent trailer that just came out, 13 minutes of gameplay, and there is actually quite a bit packed into it. So it opens up with a few minutes of driving. In and of itself, maybe not too interesting, but we do get a look at the fact that there will be some sort of a variable terrain. We see the Jeeps on multiple occasions actually get slowed up as they're kind of trying to trudge through this mud. So that's kind of cool to see, with terrains affecting your movement speed and everything like that. It does also look like there's going to be body damage mechanics for these vehicles, as at one point the player pops 2 of their tires as they're approaching this gas station. We then see them getting out and scouting with binoculars, which is nice to see that we have that kind of option. And the player attempts to loot this one vehicle at a point and then is attacked by a zombie that's inside. We see an extended section of combat after that, with the zombies seemingly taking quite a few bullets to take down. This is a departure from that first bit of zombie combat that we saw, where everything was like one shot. These zombies seem to take a lot of bullets, although part of the problem might have been just the aiming of the person. Also, I want to point out, it's pretty clear that they're using a controller. I talked about this in the last video, and everyone was like, well, why does it say press F to interact? You can be playing with a controller without the developer having implemented the user interface that corresponds to that controller. Those are two separate things. Based on their aiming and movement, these gameplay trailers have been with the use of a controller. It's pretty obvious, playing PC games for my whole life, basically. There's a big difference in aiming and movement with a mouse versus a controller. But anyways, that's a tangent. Moving back to the trailer. We noticed that there's some mantling here, which I really appreciate. That's one of those things that you really, really miss when games don't have it. We see some looting. They enter a building and then flip the circuit breaker to restore power. There's some more looting. And then after all that looting, the player uses those resources to go back and repair the vehicle. So they make this repair kit, which it says here that it required some tape, metal, and a toolbox. And then they use that repair kit to fix the tires, and the Jeep kind of pops back up. It's a pretty cool animation. After this, they drive down the road a bit more. They precariously cross over this bridge, and then they arrive at this big open field and a farmhouse. They scout it out quickly and then approach slowly through those crops. And then they scout out this barn, sneak past a few zombies, make their way into the house. And this point was really cool because once they opened the door to the home, it seemed to trigger this alarm, which the player then goes up to the alarm code box to try to disable by guessing the code based on the worn down buttons. That's a really nice touch. I liked that. But he guessed wrong a couple of times, which then tripped the alarm, and that noise brought in the zombies from outside. We see a bit more of combat, and then after dealing with the zombies and searching through the house a bit more, a group of players approach the house, blaring a police siren, which you know means they're probably streamers. The pair then run outside and go to this nearby underground bunker. We hear a couple of creepy zombie sounds, and then that is the end of the trailer. This one really did, I gotta say, despite everything I know about the developer and the likelihood of this thing not just getting abandoned in early access, it looks good, dude. I get all of the excitement, totally, absolutely. I really, really like what they've said and what they've shown of the game. Getting all this additional footage of the world, exploration, driving, looting, various mechanics, interacting with alarms and stuff like that, and then the PvE as well as PvP combat. It does look like they've got the foundation of a legitimately interesting zombie survival MMO, and I hope they deliver, but we can't ignore the fact that they've abandoned their past 2 early access games. That is a big deal. Now that said, I'm not looking to hold the developer strictly to their past work. Hey, look, I've made plenty of bad YouTube videos myself, and I'm always trying to improve with the work that I do, so I get that they're probably doing the same thing, right? And if we want to put a spin on this that sheds the day before's development in a different light from what they've worked on in the past, fact of the matter is that they're getting a ton of funding this time around, as Fantastic has partnered up with a company called Mytona, who is one of the most successful mobile game publishers in Russia. Now, whether or not you like mobile games, this means that they have a lot of money to throw around, which could mean there's a better chance that this game won't get abandoned. And then lastly, I think I just want to say here that I'm not just trying to stir up drama. Like, I promise you, that is not my focus as a YouTuber. In fact, if anything, I'm typically overly optimistic about the games that I cover. I just try to make content on things that I'm genuinely interested in and that I hope will turn out good. And that's exactly why I'm doing this coverage here, because like so many others, I saw that early trailer, I heard the premise, and I said, hot damn, if they could do this right, I will play the hell out of it. And that's still totally true. A zombie survival MMO with open world PvP, sign me up for that any day of the week. I'll check it out, totally. So, I don't care that so many titles like this have turned out to just be shovelware in the past. I'm still interested because I think this is a genre that is full of unrealized potential, and I'm hopeful that the day before turns out to be something that delivers on that promise. But will this game do that? We don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Apparently it's launching and probably in early access sometime in 2021. So we'll be checking this thing out in the not too distant future. I can guarantee you that. And we'll finally get our hands on and a firm answer. Were those trailers real? That's the question everyone's asking. All right. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. All right. Take it easy.